Good evening. Welcome to State of Business on our television. I'm Ashing Sani Veerasinghe. Let's have a look at the headlines for today. Arrest warrant issued on former Finance Minister Ravi Karnanaika and 9 others. Central Bank reduces its initial growth projection to 3.5%. News in detail. The Colombo Fort Magistrates Court today issued warrants to arrest former Finance Minister Ravi Karnanaika and 9 others over the central bank bond auctions of March 2016. Attorney General's Department directed the Inspector General of Police to obtain arrest warrants against several suspects in the central bank bond scam case, including former parliamentarian Ravi Karnanaika and several others. Attorney General's Coordinating Officer Nishara Jayaratna stated that the Acting Inspector General of Police was instructed by Attorney General Dappula Dilivera to obtain warrants from court for the arrest of former Finance Minister Ravi Karnanaika and several others. Thus, the list included the names of former Governor of the Central Bank Arjuna Mahendran, Perpetual Treasuries Limited owner Arjuna Aloysius, CEO Kasun Palisena, former Director of the Public Debt Department of the Central Bank THB Sarachandra and 6 others. They were to be arrested on charges of conspiracy, criminal misappropriations, cheating and market manipulation in respect of the bond auctions of March 2016. Central Bank of Sri Lanka stresses that the statistics show that revenue from tourism, exports and remittances have already been adversely affected by the impact of the global widespread of the coronavirus. However, speaking at the second Monetary Policy Review for 2020, Director of Economic Research at the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. Chandranath Amarasekara also noted that decline of crude oil prices and major economies being more accommodative help in easing costs of refinancing.
There will be a direct impact from the conditions in China, as China is a key source for Sri Lanka's consumer, intermediate and investment goods imports. Although China accounts for only 2% of our exports, supply chain disruptions would affect Sri Lanka's overall export performance. Chinese tourist arrivals are around 9% of total arrivals. And already we have seen arrivals from China declining by 92.5% in February. The non-return of Chinese workers will also affect the infrastructure projects which depend on the Chinese workforce. The slowdown in the global economy will also affect the Sri Lankan economy. Exports, tourism and other services exports and related value chains will be affected. There could be a slowdown in remittance inflows as well. We have also seen flight of capital from emerging market economies to safe havens. However, there could be marginal benefits accruing from lower petroleum prices and lower global interest rates.
Meanwhile, Director of Economic Research of Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. Amarasekara highlighted that concerning these outcomes, the central bank predicts economic growth to dip into 3.5% this year, which was initially predicted to be over 4%.
Overall, based on the currently available information, we expect Sri Lanka's real GDP growth in 2020 to be around 3.5% to 4% with the impact of the outbreak, compared to the previously expected range of 3.7% to 4.5%. However, the exact impact would depend on the extent of the spread and how long the effect would persist. Looking at Sri Lanka's external sector performance, we observed a policy-induced contraction in the trade deficit in 2019. With a sharp decline in imports, the trade deficit contracted to $8 billion in 2019 from $10.3 billion in 2018. With regard to the other inflows to the current account, we saw an almost full recovery of tourism from the Easter Sunday effects by January 2020. However, with the coronavirus outbreak, tourist arrivals have declined by 12.2% in the first 2 months of 2020 year-on-year.
Senior Deputy Governor of Central Bank Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe told media that the government is holding discussion in negotiating a loan from the Chinese Development Bank, which will amount to more than $1 billion.
With regard to the debt dynamics, now I think China has refused to support us, and now we are in a precarious state. India is also not in a position to give us. So how are we going to service our debts? And now that we are in an election cycle, physical slippages are possible. So don't you see every aspect of the economy going to be, including the BOP, now with the corona crisis, going to slump further down?
The comment that you made, we are not aware of this. China has reposed, India has reposed. That's information which is not available to us. But government has a clear borrowing plan for the year, for the first half and second half. So that probably, the first half is this. They are working with what they call loan from Chinese Development Bank, CDB loan. I think our understanding that has made a good progress, and that probably will materialize within a couple of weeks, this new borrowing from China. Then after the election, then once the budget is presented, there will be a borrowing plan for the next year, or even for the second half of this year. I think that the indication is between 1 to 2 billion, so it could be 1.235, its final number has not been finalized yet.
Stay tuned for more news after this short break. Welcome back after the break. Advocata policy think tank officially launched a project called Say No to Red Tape that destroys small businesses with the objective of identifying, studying and advocating for the removal of legal and regulatory barriers faced by businesses in Sri Lanka. Red tape is an expression referring to excessive regulation or rigid conformity to formal rules that is considered redundant or bureaucratic, which prevents action or decision making. It is usually applied to governments, corporations and other large organizations. As a first step towards the process, Advocata launched a report on legal and regulatory barriers for micro and small entrepreneurs. The event also featured the launch of a website for entrepreneurs to submit their frustrations or views on red tape and government processes and regulations that need to be removed or simplified. The event hosted a panel discussion among government stakeholders, policymakers and entrepreneurs where barriers faced and reforms recommended were discussed. As a component of this project, Advocata Institute also hosted the #MyStoryLK online competition where business entrepreneurs island-wide submitted stories of the barriers they faced when starting and running a business in Sri Lanka, and the winners of this competition were announced and awarded at the event. Investment institution First Capital Holdings emphasizes that the prevailing downward trend in market has made no change this week. Thus, an extensive outlook on stock performances for the gone week along with a stock forecast for the coming week will be provided to you by a subject expert at First Capital Holdings.
The market continues to be on a downward trajectory while overall market recording low volumes along with limited turnover levels. The impact of the coronavirus hampered most of the world markets, and Sri Lanka has been no different following a similar pattern. Retail activity has been extremely low with most investors on the sidelines. This week, foreign buying was seen mainly on TJL Lanka. Commodity prices have fallen across markets along with the COVID-19 having a major impact on overseas markets and trickling down the negative impact to our very own benchmark index, the ASPI. We expect high net worth and institutional buying to improve in the coming days, which is likely to have a positive impact on the market. Thereby, we can expect a reversal in the market back to the green with positive momentum that is likely to be created.
Now let's take a look at few stories for the day in brief. The Australian government, in partnership with UNICEF Sri Lanka, delivered 4 laptops to the Disaster Preparedness and Response Division of the Ministry of Health and Indigenous Medical Services to support Sri Lanka's ongoing monitoring of COVID-19. The equipment will be used by the DPRD officials and volunteers to input data from international passenger arrival cards to be shared with the island-wide network of health officials for disease surveillance. An interactive evening with Ambassador of Vietnam in Sri Lanka, Pham Thi Vish Gok, was held recently at the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. 2 publications with information on doing business with Vietnam was handed over to the Council by Ambassador of Vietnam in Sri Lanka. Meanwhile, Deputy Chief of Mission Tran Tuang Dang elaborated on the benefits of investing in Vietnam, and he noted that it has an import tax exemption for machinery and several other materials. Huawei Sri Lanka and University of Moratuwa inked a memorandum of understanding to further empower the educated and talented youth in Sri Lanka to enhance their skills in the ICT sphere as part of Huawei's long-term digital inclusion initiative, Tech for All, to support Sri Lanka to fulfill the smart nation vision of the country. Minister of Information and Communications Technology, Higher Education, Technology and Innovation Dr. Bandulu Gunawardena, Secretary to Ministry of Higher Education, Technology and Innovations Anura Dissanayake, Vice Chancellor of the University of Moratuwa Professor K.K.C.K. Pereira and Huawei Technologies Lanka Chief Executive Officer Liang Yi were present at the MOU signing ceremony. Stay tuned for stock updates after this short break. Welcome back after the break. Trading at Colombo Stock Exchange ended on a negative note today. The all-share price index dropped 141.1 points to close at 5,343.15 and the S&P SL 20 dropped 68.7 points to close at 2,479.61. The turnover was 827 million rupees and over 46 million shares were traded. Up next are forex rates. With that, we will wrap up today's news. Log into our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel to be alert on the latest updates. Join us tomorrow with Biz Roundup. Until then, take care. Good night.